Every schoolchild is taught the same story, 1492. Christopher Columbus sails the ocean blue, discovers a new world, and changes history forever. It's a clean, simple, and satisfying narrative. But what if I told you that the curtain on the Americas was pulled back 500 years before Columbus was even born? That deep in the bogs of Newfoundland, Canada, lies the smoking gun of a forgotten empire, a place where Vikings forged iron and built homes centuries before the age of discovery ever began. History isn't just a record of what happened, it's a record of what we remember. Today, we're going to strip away the myth of 1492. We're going to dive into the evidence, the sagas, and the archaeological mystery of the actual first Europeans to set foot in the Americas and why, for half a millennium, we chose to forget them. For centuries, the Vinland sagas were considered little more than fireside legends. These ancient Icelandic texts spoke of a land to the west, found by Leif Erikson, a place of wild grapes, timber, and terrifying encounters with locals. But academia dismissed these stories as Norse fantasy. That changed in the 1960s. Archaeologists Helgi and Anne Stein Ingstad didn't just guess where Vinland was, they followed the sagas like a treasure map, eventually landing on the remote northern tip of Newfoundland, a place called Meadows. What they found wasn't just a campsite, it was an industrial outpost. They found evidence of iron smithing, a technology that hadn't reached the Americas yet. They found a bronze ring-headed pin, a tool that was purely Norse, and they found the remains of 8 timber-framed sod buildings. But here is the detail that changed everything: they found a spindle whorl. In Viking culture, this was a tool used by women to spin wool. This wasn't just a landing party of warriors looking for quick loot. This was a colonial attempt. They brought their lives, their craft, and their families. So, if the evidence was there, if they were building houses and working iron, why don't we call them the discoverers of America? Why did they vanish, leaving behind nothing but grass-covered mounds, while Columbus's arrival 500 years later triggered a global earthquake? The answer, it turns out, lies not in who arrived first, but in why they stayed, or in this case, why they walked away. So if the Vikings, the most skilled sailors of the Middle Ages, found the continent, built homes, and even forged iron here, why didn't they stay? Why did the story of the Americas remain hidden from the rest of the world for another 500 years? The answer is logistical. To the Norse, Vinland wasn't a new world waiting to be conquered. It was an extreme long-distance supply run. They were stretched to their breaking point. Their colonies in Greenland were fighting for survival against a changing climate. The Little Ice Age was creeping in, and they were constantly threatened by limited resources and the massive, untamable ocean. And then there was the human element. The sagas tell stories of constant skirmishes with the local inhabitants. The Vikings were isolated, outnumbered, and thousands of miles from any backup. They weren't an invading army. They were a handful of families in an alien environment. They did what any sensible group would do. They packed up and went home. Fast forward 500 years. When Columbus arrives, the world is fundamentally different. Europe is exploding with new technology. The printing press, advanced ship designs, and, most importantly, the ravenous global ambition of the Spanish Empire. Columbus didn't just land, he brought a global system with him. This is the difference between a discovery and a conquest. The Vikings were explorers, they traded, they left, and they were forgotten. But the world of 1492 was ready to claim land, extract wealth, and fundamentally reshape the map. We don't celebrate the Viking discovery because, in the eyes of history, it didn't change the world. It was a footnote. But that footnote tells us something essential. History isn't written by the first person to arrive. It's written by the last person to leave. So, if the Vikings were there first, why do we still insist on 1492? Why does the discovery of America myth persist in our culture, our holidays, and our textbooks for so long? It's because history isn't just a record of events, it's a tool for identity. The Columbus story was never really about a sailor in a boat. It was a foundation myth for a new global order. It was the moment the Old World Europe decided that the New World was theirs for the taking. We kept the myth alive because it justified the expansion, the displacement, and the birth of the modern global economy. But by clinging to that single date, we ignore the most important truth. The Americas were not a new world. They were a thriving, ancient world. The true story of the discovery of America isn't a story of a ship arriving in 1492. It is a story of human migration that began tens of thousands of years ago, a story of people who built cities, managed forests, and developed cultures that were already thousands of years old when the first Norse ship scraped against the rocks of Newfoundland. History is often less about who was first and more about what we choose to value. When we stop looking for a discoverer, we start to see the Americas for what they actually are. Not a blank slate waiting for a visitor, but a continent with a deep, complex, and enduring human history. Maybe it's time we stop asking who discovered America and start asking what we can learn from the people who were here all along. After all, the real mystery isn't where Columbus landed, it's how we managed to miss the rest of the story for so long. So, if we finally accept that the Vikings, and so many others, were here centuries before Columbus, does it change how we see the map today? Or does it just remind us that history is less about firsts and more about the stories we choose to keep? I'm curious, when you look at a map, do you see a world that was discovered or a world that was already waiting? Let me know your take in the comments below.